I died at 11:52 on a Tuesday night, on the marble floor of a boardroom I had built, and the last thing I saw was my business partner checking his watch, not calling for help, not kneeling beside me, checking his watch the way you do when a meeting has run long and you have somewhere better to be. His name was Cassius Rode, and he had just poisoned me, and he wanted to know how much longer it was going to take. I want to tell you it was quick. It was not. The wine had tasted faintly of almonds, and I had thought, absurdly, that the caterer had changed the dessert. Cassius had poured it himself, which he never did, and I had noticed and thought nothing of it, because noticing and thinking nothing of it was the whole story of my life with Cassius Rode. By the time the glass hit the marble, my legs had already stopped answering me. I had about 90 seconds of understanding on that floor, 90 seconds to see the whole thing all the way back, every warning I had explained away, every kindness that had been a measurement, every loan of trust he had taken and never repaid. The way he had protected me from the Hollis account 20 years earlier. The way the board had somehow always been his. The way, tonight, he had asked me to come alone after hours, to sign the papers that would have let me take it all back, and how relieved I had been that he was being so reasonable about it. He had not been being reasonable. He had been arranging to be the only person in the building. 90 seconds is a very long time when it is the last of them. And then I closed my eyes on that marble floor at the age of 44. And I opened them in my childhood bedroom at the age of 19, 25 years earlier, on the morning of the day everything started. My name is Adrian Halle. The first time I lived, I built a company called Meridian out of nothing, and a man I loved like a brother took it from me one careful piece at a time and then killed me so I could not take it back. The second time, I knew all of it before he did. I am not going to pretend the first hour was anything but madness. I lay in that narrow bed in my mother's house, in a body that ached in none of the places I had grown used to aching, listening to a radio downstairs playing a song I had not heard in a quarter of a century, and I was certain I had lost my mind. Then my mother called up the stairs that I would be late, and her voice was young, younger than I could stand, and I understood that whatever this was, I was going to have to move through it as though it were real, because the alternative was to lie in that bed and come apart. So I got up, and I went downstairs. I nearly didn't make it. Halfway down I caught sight of my own hand on the banister. Smooth, unscarred, a boy's hand, missing the burn mark I'd carried since I was 31 from a server fire that hadn't happened yet, and my legs went out from under me. I sat down hard on the stairs, and I made a sound I am not proud of. And I sat across from my mother, who had been dead for 11 years the last time I checked, and I watched her butter toast and complain about the neighbor's dog, and I held myself together with both hands. She looked up at me once and asked if I was all right. I looked pale, and I said I hadn't slept well, which was true, and I did not say the rest of it, which was that I had watched her funeral in the rain at the age of 33 and had spent the 11 years since wishing I could sit in a kitchen and hear her complain about anything at all. I had wished for exactly this, without ever once believing it could be given. Now it was in front of me, buttering toast, and I could not tell her, and the weight of that nearly finished what the stairs had started. And while I did, some cold and functional part of my mind, the part Cassius had trained without ever meaning to, began quietly to make a list. Because here is the thing about being murdered by someone you trusted. Afterward, in the 90 seconds, you finally see all of it. And I had seen all of it. I knew every move he was going to make, because I had lived through every one of them once already, believing each time that it was chance or the market or my own failure. The first time I met Cassius Rode on the 14th of September, in the reading room of a university library, when he sat down across from me uninvited and asked what I was working on. I knew, lying in that childhood bed, that it was currently the 11th of September, which meant that in 3 days, a young man with an easy smile and the warmest eyes I have ever seen on a human being was going to walk into my life and spend the next 25 years dismantling it. And this time I was going to be there first. Let me tell you who Cassius was, because if I make him a villain you will not understand how it happened, and if you do not understand how it happened you will think you are safe from your own version of him. You are not. That is the whole reason I am telling this. Cassius was better with people than anyone I have ever known. Not smoother, smooth you can see. He was warmer. He made you feel, in a 5-minute conversation, that you were the most capable and interesting person he had ever met, And the terrible thing is that he half meant it because he genuinely loved talent the way some men love money. He collected it. He found people who could build things and he attached himself to them, and he made himself so useful, so encouraging, so present, that by the time you understood he had never once built anything himself, you could no longer imagine working without him. I built Meridian. The idea was mine, the architecture was mine, the sleepless years were mine. Cassius handled people, investors, hires, clients, and he was extraordinary at it, and for a long time that division felt like a partnership. It was not a partnership. It was an infiltration conducted at the speed of trust, which is the only speed at which it works. Let me show you one so you understand the craft of it, because a summary makes it sound crude and it was the opposite of crude. The first time, in our third year, we nearly lost our biggest client, an account called Halle that was, at that point, close to half our revenue. Halle was furious about a delivery we had missed, and it was my fault, a technical failure I had promised would not happen, and it had. I was ready to fly out and fall on my sword. Cassius stopped me. Gently, he said, and I remember every word, because I replayed it 1,000 times later. Adrian, you're too close to this. You'll go in there apologizing and they'll smell the blood. Let me handle Halle. You're the best builder I've ever seen. But you are not the man to walk into that room. Trust me. Let me protect you from this one. Let me protect you. That was the phrase. He used it perhaps 12 times over the years, always at a moment of real fear, always as a kindness, and every single time what he was actually saying was, let me take this relationship from you forever while you are too frightened to notice. He saved the Halle account. He genuinely saved it. He was brilliant, he flew out, he charmed them, he came back a hero. And Halle, from that day, belonged to Cassius. They trusted him, not me. He had made my worst moment into his acquisition, and I had thanked him for it. I had bought him a drink. That is how he took equity, a little at a time, always for good reasons, always at moments when I needed him and he was kind enough to help. He took relationships. He made sure the investors trusted him more than me, the board liked him more than me, the key hires felt loyal to him and not to the difficult founder who lived in the technical weeds. He built, inside my company, a second company made entirely of loyalty to Cassius Rode, and he built it so slowly that I mistook every brick of it for friendship. And when it was complete, when the board was his and the money was his and the people were his, he removed me. A vote I lost before I walked into the room. And when, 2 years later, I found a way to come back, to expose what he had done, to take it to the people who could undo it. That was the boardroom. That was the Tuesday. That was the watch. So, the list. 19 years old, in my mother's kitchen, I knew 4 things Cassius did not know I knew. I knew he was coming on the 14th to the library. I knew exactly how he worked because I had felt every technique from the inside. I knew what Meridian would become, which meant I knew which of the 1,000 forks in the next 25 years actually mattered and which were noise. And I knew the one thing that had killed me the first time, which was not any single move of his. It was that I had never, not once in 25 years, kept a record. I had trusted, and trust does not leave evidence. When I finally tried to expose him, I had nothing but my word against a man the whole world found more likable than me. The second time, I was going to build the company again. But underneath it, from the very first day, I was going to build something else. A second set of books. A record of everything. Not because I was planning revenge, although I was, but because I had learned on a marble floor that the truth does not defend itself. Someone has to write it down while it is happening. On the 14th of September, I went to the library early. I sat at the same table. And I want you to understand how strange it was to sit there and wait for the man who would murder me, knowing his face, knowing his voice, knowing the exact easy thing he was about to say, and to have to arrange my own face into the expression of a 19-year-old who had never seen him before. He came in at 4:20, exactly as he had the first time. Same jacket. Same unhurried walk. The walk of a man who has never once been afraid he was not wanted. He scanned the room the way he always did. I had watched him do it 100 times at parties, that quick warm inventory of who was worth knowing, and his eyes found me and he came over and he sat down across from me uninvited, and he smiled the smile that had cost me my life. "What are you working on?" he said. And I looked up at him, at 25 years of grief wearing the face of a boy, and I smiled back, and I said the thing I had decided to say on the walk over. "Nothing yet," I said. But I've got an idea I think is going to be worth a great deal of money. You look like someone who'd know what to do with that. I watched it land. I watched his eyes change, that flicker of appetite he thought nobody could see, the collector spotting something for the shelf. The first time, I had been guarded and shy and he had spent weeks patiently earning me. This time I handed myself to him on the first afternoon, because I had finally understood the one thing that made Cassius dangerous. He could only take what he was given slowly over years without the giver noticing. A thing offered freely and fast, with open eyes, was a thing he did not know how to hold. I was not going to hide from him. I was going to keep him so close that I could watch every move before he made it. Keep your enemies closer is a stupid saying, usually. It is not stupid when you already know the ending. But knowing the ending, it turns out, is not the comfort you would imagine. There were nights in that second life, many of them, when I lay awake and wondered whether I had actually come back at all, or whether the 90 seconds on the marble floor had simply stretched, the way they say a drowning mind will replay a whole life, and I was in fact still dying, still on the floor, dreaming an elaborate revenge because the truth was too much to bear. I could not prove otherwise. A man who has been given an impossible thing spends a great deal of energy suspecting the gift. And there was a darker doubt underneath that one. Even if it was real, even if I had truly been given 25 years back, was I using them well? I had been handed a second life, a living mother, a young body, a clean start, and I was spending every waking hour of it hunting a man who, in this timeline, had not yet done anything to me. Cassius, the second time, had not killed me. Could not have. I was watching him too closely. In this life he was, by any external measure, my devoted friend and partner, and I was methodically, patiently, over decades, building the machine that would destroy him for crimes he had committed against a version of me that no longer existed. I never resolved that doubt. I acted anyway. I tell you about it because I do not want you to think this is a clean story about justice. It is a story about a dead man who was given a second chance and spent it refighting the war that killed him, and won, and is not entirely sure even now that winning was the best use of a resurrection. We built Meridian again, and this time I let him do exactly what he had done before. That surprised him, I think, though he would never have said so. I let him handle the people. I let him charm the first investor, the same first investor, a man named Pole who I knew would put in $80,000 if you let Cassius talk to him for 20 minutes, and who did, again, almost to the day. I let Cassius feel useful, indispensable, central. I let him believe the infiltration was working. The difference was underneath. The first time I had given him equity in little grateful pieces. This time I structured the company before he ever saw a document, with a founder's protection so deep and so boring that no one ever questioned it, because I presented it as tax efficiency and Cassius did not understand tax and did not want to. He signed it himself. He was a witness to his own defeat and he found the meeting tedious. The first time, he had made the investors trust him more than me. This time I made a point every single quarter of sending each investor a written update in my own name. Dry, detailed, honest, the kind of thing Cassius would never bother with because it did not flatter anyone. He owned the rooms. But I owned the record, and a record is a quiet thing that waits. And the first time I had kept nothing. This time, from the first week, I kept the second set of books. Every conversation that mattered, I wrote down afterward, dated, factual. Every time Cassius asked for a little more equity, a little more authority, a little more control over a relationship, I gave it to him, and then I went home and I recorded exactly what he had asked for and exactly what reason he had given. Not angry, not editorializing, just the record. A man building a case does not need adjectives. The facts, in order, are the entire weapon. I told myself for the first 2 years that I was only being careful. That was a lie, and I knew it was a lie, and I want to be honest about it because this is the part of the story where I stopped being only a victim. I was not being careful. I was hunting. I had come back from the dead with a single purpose, and every warm dinner I had with Cassius, every genuine laugh, and there were genuine laughs, that is the horror of it, was also a measurement. I was doing to him, slowly, exactly what he had done to me. I was letting him believe in a friendship that I had already decided to end. The difference, I told myself, was that he had done it to take, and I was doing it to survive. I still believe that difference is real. I am no longer certain it is as large as I needed it to be. The years went well, which is its own kind of strange when you have already lived them going badly. Meridian grew faster the second time, and I want to give you one moment of it because a story that is only about a knife forgets that there was a reason the knife was worth using. In the first life, we had nearly gone under in year 2. A competitor called Vantar had beaten us to a contract that would have made us, and we spent 18 desperate months chasing a product direction to recover, and the product direction was wrong, and it almost killed the company. Cassius had, of course, used that near death to make himself more indispensable. Crises were his harvest. The second time, I knew Vantar was coming. I knew the exact contract, the exact month, the exact reason we would lose it. So 6 months early, quietly, I built the one feature that would have won it. And when Vantar and Meridian both walked into that room, we did not lose. We won, and Vantar never recovered from losing, and the 18 months of near-death simply did not happen. I watched Cassius's face when we won that contract. He was delighted, genuinely, warmly delighted, because our success was his success. But underneath the delight there was the faintest flicker of something else, and I knew exactly what it was, because I had spent a lifetime learning to read him. It was the flicker of a man who feeds on crises, noticing that the crisis had not come. His harvest had failed, and he did not yet know why, and some animal part of him had felt the ground shift. I wasted none of the 18 months I had wasted the first time. I skipped the dead end. I went straight to the thing that had eventually worked, and we got there years early, and by the time we were the age Meridian had been when Cassius first moved against me, we were 4 times the size. That created a problem I had not anticipated, and it is the first place my perfect knowledge began to fail me. Because Cassius, the first time, had moved against me on a specific timeline. He had waited until the company was valuable enough to be worth taking but still small enough for a boardroom coup to be clean. By making Meridian succeed faster, I had moved that window. I had assumed I knew when he would strike. I did not. I had changed the board he was reading. I realized this the way you realize you have misjudged a stare in the dark. A lurch all at once. We were at a dinner, the 4 of us who mattered by then, and Cassius made a joke about succession, about what would happen to Meridian if anything happened to Adrian. And everyone laughed, and I laughed, and underneath the laugh a cold voice in me said, "He is early. He is 2 years early. You did this. You made him hungry sooner." I went home and I did not sleep, and somewhere around 3 in the morning I understood the mistake I had been making, which was the mistake of every man who thinks knowledge is the same as control. I had come back believing I held a map. But the moment I started walking a different path, the map began to lie. The territory was changing under me because I was changing it. Cassius was not a recording I could watch again. He was a living man, and living men adapt, and the more successful I made us, the faster and more cleverly he was going to move, with all the same gifts and none of the same schedule. And then, in the 7th year, something happened that nearly destroyed everything, and it happened precisely because I had changed the past. There was a woman named Reyna. The first time I lived, she had joined Meridian in our 9th year, long after Cassius had consolidated his hold, and she had been one of his people from the start, sharp, loyal to him, part of the machine that removed me. I had disliked her intensely the first time, and I had been wrong too, because I had never known her when she was not already his. This time, because we had grown faster, Reyna joined in year 7 instead of year 9. And she joined before Cassius had gotten to her. She reported to me on the technical side, and she was, without exception, the most gifted engineer I have ever worked with. And she saw me. That is the only way I can describe it. Reyna watched me operate for about 4 months, and then one evening she stayed late and she said carefully, "Can I ask you something strange? You always know what's going to go wrong. Before it does. Every time. It's like you've read the ending." She was half joking. She was also completely serious, and her eyes were not joking at all. I nearly told her. God help me. After 7 years of being the only person alive who knew the truth, I nearly told a 26-year-old engineer that I had died on a marble floor and come back to do it again. The loneliness of foreknowledge is a specific and crushing thing, and she had cracked it open with one sentence, and I wanted so badly to not be alone in it that I actually opened my mouth. And Cassius walked in. He had a sense for these things, for moments of intimacy that did not include him, for rooms where a loyalty was forming that he did not own. He came in with 2 coffees and his easy smile, and he said something warm and funny, and he sat down, and within 10 minutes he had folded himself into the conversation so completely that the thing between Reyna and me simply closed over like water. But he had seen it. I watched him see it. And over the following months I watched Cassius do to Reyna exactly what he had done to Hollis, exactly what he had done to me. The warmth, the attention, the let me protect you from the difficult founder. He was recruiting her because he had identified her as either his greatest weapon or his greatest threat, and he intended to make sure it was the former. I had a choice, and it was the hardest one of the second life. I could fight him for Reyna, compete for her loyalty directly, warmth against warmth, and lose because I always lost that contest. Or I could let her go to him, let her become his lieutenant exactly as she had the first time, and protect the plan. I let her go. I want to be clear about what that cost. Reyna Osei was the one person in either of my lives who saw me clearly and liked what she saw, and I stood back and let a murderer collect her, because keeping her would have risked the record and the trap and the whole architecture of my revenge. I told myself it was necessary. It was necessary. It was also the moment I understood that I had become willing to sacrifice a living person to a dead man's memory, and that Cassius had, in a sense I could not undo, already won something that no trap could ever give me back. Because I could not outplan him forever. He was better at people than me. That had never changed. If this became a contest of maneuvering, he would eventually win, because on a long enough timeline the warmer man always wins the room. So I did the only thing that actually protected me. I stopped trying to control when he would strike, and I made sure that whenever he struck, the trap was already closed. Here is what I mean. I could not stop Cassius from turning the board against me. He was too good at it, and I had proven the first time that I could not beat him in a room. So I did not try to keep the board. Instead, I made the founder's protection I had buried in the original structure conditional on a single thing. Any attempt to remove the founder automatically triggered a full independent audit of the company's governance, funded in advance, contractually mandatory, impossible to waive. I presented it years earlier as investor protection, a safeguard against a rogue founder. The investors loved it. Cassius, who only ever read the parts of documents that concerned his own equity, waved it through. He thought it protected them from me. It was a hole with a cover made of trust, and I had spent years walking him toward it. In the weeks before the move came, I did something I had never done the first time, because the first time I had not known the move was coming at all. I prepared to lose. Every instinct in me wanted to fight, to shore up the board, to win back the relationships, to outwarm the warmest man alive. That instinct was the one that had killed me, so I sat on my hands. I let the concerns spread. I let Cassius believe the isolation was working because it was working because I was allowing it. The hardest thing I have ever done was to watch a man turn my own people against me in real time, knowing every step of it, and to do nothing to stop it, because stopping it was the losing move and letting it happen was the winning one. I checked the founder's protection clause the way a man checks a parachute. I read it until I could recite it. I confirmed, through counsel who did not know why I was asking, that it was airtight, that it could not be waived, that the moment a removal vote passed it would trigger of its own accord. And then I waited for my friend to try to end me the way he had ended me before, and this time I let him walk all the way to the edge of the thing I had built for him. The move, when it finally came the way I now knew it always would, warmly. Cassius did not come to me as an enemy. He came to me as a worried friend. He sat in my office and he told me, with what looked exactly like pain, that the board had concerns, that I had become difficult, isolated, that the company had outgrown its founder and everyone could see it but me, and that he had fought for me. He had really fought, but he was only one voice. I had heard this speech before. The first time it had destroyed me. I had walked out of that conversation and spent a sleepless month trying to win back people who were already gone, never understanding that the vote was lost before the concerns were ever raised. This time I sat and listened to the man who had murdered me deliver the eulogy for my career with tears actually standing in his eyes, and I felt something I had not expected to feel. Not triumph, not even anger, grief, real grief, because some part of me, some 19-year-old part that had gotten into a body again and sat across a library table, had spent all these years hoping, against everything I knew, that this time it would be different, that maybe I had changed him, that maybe the warmth had been real and the friendship could have held if I had only been a better partner. He reached the end of his speech. He told me the board would be voting on Thursday. He said he was so sorry. He said he hoped that whatever happened, we would always be friends. And I said, "Thank you, Cassius. I know how hard this must be for you." And I meant it as the cruelest thing I have ever said, and he heard it as gratitude, and that gap between us was the whole of both our lives. The vote went exactly as he had arranged. I lost the board decisively just as I had the first time. Cassius had done his work perfectly. Every relationship, every quiet dinner, every carefully planted concern. Flawless. Watching him operate, even as the target, I could admire it. He was an artist and I was his masterpiece both times. The difference was that this time, losing the vote was not the end of the meeting. It was the trigger. The moment the board voted to remove me as founder, the governance clause activated. Automatically, contractually, the independent audit I had funded years earlier and buried in the founding documents did not require anyone to call for it. It simply began the way a trap does not ask permission to close. And an independent audit of Meridian's governance meant an independent examiner, with full contractual access, walking through every decision the company had ever made. Every equity transfer, every relationship, every quiet accumulation of control by a man who handled the people and never touched the product. They were not looking at me. That was the part Cassius could not have anticipated, because it required someone to have decided years in advance to be looked at. The audit was framed as an investigation into whether the founder had been rightly removed. What it found, because it could not help but find it, was the shape of Cassius Rode. Not a crime at first. Cassius was too careful for crimes. What it found was a pattern, a decade-long, meticulously documented pattern of one man positioning himself to control an enterprise he had not built, through the systematic cultivation and isolation of its founder. On its own, a pattern is not enough. Patterns can be explained. A warm man can explain almost anything. But the audit did not arrive alone. It arrived because I made sure it did, alongside a record. And then something happened that I had not planned, that no foreknowledge could have given me, and it is the reason I can bear to tell this story at all. Reyna came to me. 3 days after the board removed me, before the audit had found anything, before Cassius could consolidate his win. Reyna Osei knocked on the door of the small office I had been permitted to keep during the transition, and she closed it behind her and she put a flash drive on the desk. "I've been keeping records," she said, "for 4 years. Since the night you almost told me something and didn't. I did not understand." I told her I did not understand. "You let him take me," she said. "In year 7. I felt it happen. I didn't know why you let go. I spent years angry about it, actually, but I knew something was wrong. Because the man who could read the ending of everything suddenly couldn't be bothered to fight for the best engineer he'd ever hired. That's not a mistake. You don't make mistakes like that. So I decided to find out what you were protecting. And the only way to find out was to get close to Cassius. So I did. I sat there and I understood, and it was the single most humbling moment of 2 entire lives. "You thought you were letting him recruit me," Reyna said. "I let him think that too. But I was never his Adrian. I was watching his hands. I learned it from you." She had done, independently, out of loyalty to a man who had abandoned her, the exact thing I had come back from the dead to do. She had kept her own second set of books, from inside Cassius's own camp, with an access I had never had in either life. I gave the examiner the second set of books, both of them mine and Reyna's. Mine showed the pattern from the founder's side. Hers showed it from inside his own operation, in his own careless words, spoken to someone he believed belonged to him. 10 years of it. Every conversation, dated. Every request for equity with the reason he had given. Every relationship he had asked me to step back from so that he could step into it. Set against the company's real documents, the transfers, the board minutes, the investor communications that I, and only I, had kept in my own name for a decade. The pattern stopped being a thing that could be explained. Because here is what a record does that a victim cannot. A victim says he manipulated me, and the room looks at the victim and weighs whether to believe him, and a warm man is always more believable than a bitter one. But a record says on the 3rd of March he asked for 4%, citing the Hollis account. On the 9th of March he asked to be sole contact for the Hollis account. On the 2nd of April the Hollis account was moved to his direct report, and the room does not weigh the victim at all. The room simply reads. and what it reads it cannot unread. I was not there when Cassius understood. I have thought about that the way I once thought about being in the boardroom. The first time he had watched me die and checked his watch. This time I chose deliberately not to watch him fall. I did not need the room to exist anymore. I needed the truth to be on the record, permanent, in a form that the warmest smile on earth could not talk its way out of. And it was. The audit's findings went to the investors, the same investors who, for 10 years, had received a dry and honest quarterly letter in my name, and Cassius's charm in person. It turns out that when the charm and the record finally contradict each other, 10 years of boring honesty is worth more than any dinner. They had liked Cassius, but they had trusted me quietly without ever quite noticing, because I was the one who had always told them the truth in writing. Cassius was removed from Meridian 91 days after he removed me, not by a vote he could charm, by a mechanism that had been waiting in the walls since before he ever asked for his first percent. His equity, which the founder's protection had quietly capped, was worth a fraction of what he believed. The relationships he had spent a decade cultivating evaporated the moment the record showed the people what the cultivation had been for. And I came back, not through a vote. The founder's protection returned control to me automatically once the governance failure was established, which is a sentence I wrote into a document when I was 22 years old, in a body I had died in, for a reason no one around me could have understood. I want to tell you that fixing it felt like victory. It did not. Felt like work. Meridian had been damaged by the fight. You cannot remove the man who owns half the relationships in a company without the company feeling it. Clients who had loved Cassius did not care that he was a parasite. They cared that their favorite person was gone and the difficult founder was back. I spent a year rebuilding trust that Cassius had spent a decade stealing, and the irony of that was not lost on me. I had to become, a little, the thing he had been. I had to walk into rooms and be warm and be present and make people feel chosen. I was bad at it. I got less bad. It cost me something to get less bad, and I am not sure I like the man who learned it. Reyna became my partner. Real partner, equity, title, a founder's protection of her own, which I insisted on and structured so that no one could ever do to her what had been done to me. She runs the people now the way Cassius did, except that she does it to build and not to take, and watching her do it well is one of the few things in this second life that has felt uncomplicatedly good. I had spent so long planning how to win that I had given almost no thought to the morning after, and the morning after is long and quiet, and full of consequences that no amount of foreknowledge prepares you for. I knew every move of the war. I knew nothing about the peace. Nobody comes back from the dead with a map of the peace. I saw Cassius one last time. He asked to meet and I agreed because I am not made of stone and because I still wanted even then to understand something I had never understood in either life. We met in a coffee shop which felt absurd for the ending of a thing this size. He looked smaller. Not defeated exactly. Men like Cassius are never quite defeated, they are only relocated, but smaller the way a fire looks smaller in daylight. You planned this, he said. All of it. From the beginning. Yes. How long? And there it was, the question, and I could not answer it honestly without sounding insane, so I told him the truth in the only language he would accept. Longer than you think, I said. I saw you coming a long way off. He nodded slowly. And then he asked the question I had been waiting 25 years and one death to hear. Why did you let me get so close? You could have kept me out. You saw it. Why let me all the way in? And I looked at the man who had been my brother and my murderer in a coffee shop, in a life he did not know he was living for the second time, and I told him the one true thing I had learned on a marble floor at the age of 44. Because the first time, I said, I kept you at arm's length for years, and I still lost everything. Distance didn't protect me. It just meant I never saw the knife until it was in. So this time I brought you close enough that I could watch your hands. The whole time, Cassius. I watched your hands the whole time. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Reyna. Yes. She was mine. He said it the way a man says a thing he has staked a great deal on. I made sure of her. Years of it. She was mine. She was never yours, I said. She was watching your hands too. She learned it from me and I learned it from you. You built the thing that ended you, Cassius. You taught two people how to survive you, and then you gave us both 20 years to practice. He did not understand. How could he? He heard a metaphor. I meant it exactly. He left. I finished my coffee. And that, more or less, is the end of the part of the story you would call revenge. But it is not the end of the story because I need to tell you the thing I actually learned, and it is not the thing you think. I got my company back. I got my life back. I have more years now than the marble floor ever promised me, and I have spent some of them well and some of them badly, the way anyone does. Cassius never rose again, not really. A man whose entire genius is trust cannot easily rebuild once the record of him exists. I made sure the record existed. I do not regret it. Here is what I did not expect. Winning did not undo the dying. I thought it would. I thought if I could go back and get it right. See the knife, keep the record, close the trap. Then the 90 seconds on the floor would stop belonging to me. They do not. I still wake, some nights, 44 years old on cold marble, watching a man I love check his watch. Foreknowledge did not save me from the wound. It only let me win the fight the wound started. And the second thing, which is harder. I spent 25 years the second time watching Cassius's hands. Every dinner a measurement. Every laugh a data point. I kept my record faithfully, and my record was true, and it destroyed him exactly as I intended. But a man who spends 25 years watching another man's hands has also spent 25 years unable to simply hold one. I got everything back except the thing I had actually lost, which was the ability to trust a friend without keeping the books. Cassius took that from me the first time on the marble floor, and the way I beat him the second time made sure I could never get it back. That is the cost nobody warns you about. When someone teaches you to survive them, they leave that lesson inside you forever, and it does not switch off when they fall. I am safe now. I am also, in a specific and permanent way, alone in a manner I chose and would choose again and grieve every single day. If you have your own Cassius, and most people do, eventually, someone warm who is slowly moving into rooms you thought were yours, I am not going to tell you to trust more. That would be a lie, and I have told enough lies, mostly to myself. I will tell you this instead. Keep the record. Not out of paranoia, and not because everyone is a Cassius, because they are not. Keep it because the truth does not defend itself, and the warmest liar will always outtalk an honest man who has nothing written down. I learned that on a marble floor. I paid for the lesson with a life. I am giving it to you for free. Write down what happens while it is happening. You may never need it. I hope you never need it. But if the day ever comes when someone you loved is standing over you checking his watch, the only thing that will still be on your side is the record you kept when you still believed you would never have to use it. Kept mine. That is the whole difference between the first time and the second. Not the foreknowledge. Not the second chance. The record. It always was.